Welcome back to Hard Times Billiards. Jay Helfert here. It's the Hard Times 10-Ball Championship. I got a special guest with me. You've heard of Gina Q. Well, we got the master cue maker, Ernie Guttierrez. Hey, Ernie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good.
Huh?
First time over here in about 3 years.
It's been a while.
Yep.
It's been a while. So what do you think?
Oh, it's pretty nice. It's like going back to the past.
Yeah. Well, you know, Hard Times never changes.
I know. I noticed that.
I mean, look at this crowd of people.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's,
Very reminiscent of the big tournaments we used to do years ago.
Pretty much.
Ernie, they had a stellar field here. It was like a world-class tournament. We had many of the top players. I mean, indicative, Shane Van Boening, he's the hottest player in the country right now. He's won 4 tournaments already this year. He's playing for the hot seat. You know his opponent, Max Eberle.
Sure. It's a lot of names that I don't know. You know, I've been away from the tournament scene for so long.
Well, you're buried in your shop making cues.
That's right.
Have you? How long has it been? You've been continuously making cues for what? 20 years now.
22 years.
22
continuously.
years. Continuously. And then you had a break before that for how long? Maybe
I
7
stopped
or 8?
in 1972, and then I started putting my new shop together in '88. I made the first cues in 1990, I believe. In fact, we had a tournament here.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's
after
right.
I finished my first cues, the second edition. We had a tournament over here, and then I've been making cues every day since then.
But you were making your first edition cue in the late 60s?
Early 60s.
Early 60s.
63, and I stopped in 72.
Okay. And those cues are still around. I still see first edition.
Surprised how many of them come back around for refinish, new shafts.
Yeah.
And the prices are, going totally out of sight. It's.
Ernie, I think I bought a cue from you in about 1970. Maybe it was 70. Yeah, something like that. The zebra wood cue.
Yeah.
I think I paid $135 for that cue. Does that sound right?
Probably.
Will you make me another one like it?
I don't use it anymore. It's kind of difficult.
Okay.
It's,
in case you don't know, Ernie was a pretty good pool player this day. You and I used to play bank pool years ago.
Yeah, that was years ago.
That was your favorite game.
Yeah.
And mine too.
You know why, don't you? Because, Eddie Taylor was like my idol. And I learned a lot from him, He showed me things that I didn't believe it was possible to do on a pool table, And I picked it up just admiring him and Cannonball.
Cannonball. He was the next best
Cannonball, Nate, and Eddie Taylor. I used to watch him banking, and it just kind of stuck to me, But it's not the same anymore,
Yeah, well,
I don't have it anymore.
You don't have the desire to play anymore.
I have the desire. You just can't execute it. You get frustrated.
Yeah.
You know that you can make the shot. You've done it 100 times. You go out there and you hit it, and the ball goes in the opposite direction.
You still have the knowledge.
Oh yeah, but
you
the
lose
knowledge
something
is not
in your
enough.
arm. Yeah.
The knowledge is not enough. That's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
You got the knowledge. You know what it should happen after you hit the ball, but you're doing something wrong because it doesn't. It goes the other way. You can be short,
Ernie,
long.
This is a game that takes hours of practice.
It's practice,
And when we were young guys, we were on the table all the time. But
take a shot and practice it 50 times back to back. You know what I mean? Until you got it perfect.
This guy you see in front of you, Shane Van Boening, he stayed at my house a couple years ago for a week. Do you know, I would wake up in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. He's on my table. It's 7 o'clock in the night. He's still hitting balls. I mean, he literally hit balls 12 hours a day.
That's what it takes. People don't really realize the dedication that it takes to become a real good, solid pool player.
A top player.
To be able to be consistent and you take so many hours. Every table play is different. The humidity, the dryness.
I think it's the same level of skill and the same level of ability that it takes to be a top professional golfer, a top professional tennis player.
I don't know. I think I have discussed this discussion with a lot of people. I think this is tougher than golf.
Maybe.
Golf, you got one ball, you got one hole.
Right.
Okay. Over here, you got 15 balls, 16 with a cue ball. You got 6 holes. But you got to be able to place every ball where it belongs,
Right.
Or if you only have one object in your head, well, you got trees, you got this, you got that. But that is
That's a very interesting
I don't really
observation.
consider that because you got the cloud here for a
Yeah,
second.
you've got to be in control of all 16 balls.
Listen, not only that, you hit a ball, you got to know where the cue ball is going because you can scratch. And golf,
Exactly.
if you hit a bad shot, it was your fault. You hooked it or you shanked it somehow.
Right.
Over here it's a miscue. But you don't really have to. If you put it in the trees, you made a bad shot.
Right.
But you get to shoot again.
Right.
If you miss a shot, the other guy's going to run out.
Exactly.
Follow me?
Yeah,
The competition,
exactly.
I think it's a lot tougher to be a top pool player.
Well, we're starting the match now. Max won the leg. This again is a race to 9 for the hot seat. First prize in this tournament's $3,000. These guys are guaranteed top 3, so even if they lose here, at least $1,300. On the adjoining table, Scott Frost is playing Dennis Arculio. That's the match for 3rd and 4th place.
What did you say the first prize was?
First prize is $3,000 this weekend.
First prize in a golf match, how much is that? What's the prize
Try $1 million this weekend.
in a tennis match?
Four or
$1.5 million,
500,000, yeah, something like that.
I mean,
well, this is really this is kind of a bridge event between the Mountain View tournament that was last weekend and the bigger tournaments in Las Vegas next week. But even the big tournaments in Las Vegas next, first prize $20,000 in one division, $10,000 in another division. The biggest purses in pool today, Ernie. First prize might be $40,000-$50,000. That's the biggest tournaments. Oh, that's in China, in some of in the Middle East. The World Championships, that's the most they can win. Well, Shane won at Derby City this year. Shane won about $54,000.
Really?
Yeah, and that's a huge purse. That's a huge purse.
Still, I don't think we're going to see millionaire pool players.
No. Well, for a moment, when Kevin Trudeau was around, they had a few tournaments where the payoffs were pretty big, but that was over quickly, as you know.
Yeah, somehow they figured out a way to run it. I'd like to have another tournament. Maybe for my 50th anniversary.
Why not? We'll do a Gina Q Open. We'll do a Gina Q Open.
I'd like to, how many players do you have in this tournament?
This is a full field. There were 64 players.
64.
It was a strong field. If you look at the board down there, it's a world-class field, Ernie. There's at least 24 of the top players in the world in this field.
Yeah, if they decide to have it, I would like to have the top players in the world. Try to organize something good.
Well, we can talk about that another time, but I'd love to work with you on something like that. Well,
I'm going to be making my 50th anniversary. I'm working on it right now, my 50th anniversary cue.
That's amazing.
So,
that's amazing.
Many years making holes and plugging them up.
Ernie, I got to give you all the credit in the world that you still get into that shop every day. You're in there, 5 days a week?
6 days a week.
6 days a week?
8-10 hours every day.
I mean, Ernie,
I really enjoy what I do.
You make the cues. You make them yourself.
That's right. But you see, I really enjoy what I do. I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as my hobby, as my love. It's a difference.
You have a passion for these cues.
That's exactly.
Yeah. Well,
once in a while I take a break and get into something else. Design. I have designed a lot of parts for motorcycles and race cars and stuff. That's like the type of a break that I take from the cues because it gets monotonous. But I know that after 2-3 months I finish my project and I go back to making cues.
Well, each of your cues, Ernie, is considered a work of art in the billiard world, and they're probably among the most coveted cues you can own.
Well, they're made to be played with. There's not, although they're works of art, it's functional art. In fact, I really recommend for people to play with the cues. It's not good to put them in a cabinet or in a drawer or use them as a showpiece. Because they're wood, and they like to be used. I mean, you gotta take care of them, Well, listen, when I was playing a lot of pool, I played tournaments where I was playing with a cue that I've been offered tremendous amount of money for. I would break it with a cue.
$20,000 cue, and you play with it.
$20,000. One would play $300,000.
Oh, the old ivory cue. Oh yeah.
I was playing with that cue in Reno, breaking the balls, and people were freaking out. I did it on purpose just to see that, it's not the price of the cue. The cue is what made me play with.
It is a cue stick.
It's a cue, and I will play as well as any other cue. Now, of course, you got to be careful. You don't want to be banging against the table. You don't want to be throwing it around. You don't want to lose your tempers, but they're all functional.
It's functional art.
Exactly what it is.
But Ernie, today, so many collectors, if they buy a cue for $10,000 or $20,000, they are not going to play with that cue. That's the reality.
I recommend to all the people to buy those cues, to, if nothing else,
hit balls.
Take them out of the case, roll them in the table, let them breathe. You can't keep them in a place in the same position for a long time, and with a nice light shining on it, because you're going to ruin it. If nothing happens to the wood, even the colors of the wood will change because they keep bleached out with the light. A lot of people are making a mistake in doing that. I think finally I've been able to convince most of the people, there are a lot of cues, to work on them a little bit. Take them out of the cases or the boxes where they have them, roll them in the table, use them, hit a few balls with them. I
hope all you people out there are listening. This is a word to the wise from Ernie Guttierrez. All these people out there collect cues. Take them out and play with them.
Oh yeah, you can't leave them in a place. I keep it in my closet. Nice place, whatever. It might be too dry. It might be too humid. It might be leaning sideways. But if you lean sideways for a year or 2 years, what's going to happen to you?
It's going to warp.
It's going to warp.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What do you recommend the best way to store a cue when you're not using it?
Well, the best is standing up, of course.
Standing up.
Standing up.
You mean put together?
Put together the best, but you also have to be careful in where you put the cue together. If you put it up against the wall, and it's a humid wall, for example,
right,
the back part of that cue is going to be humid. When you take it somewhere else, that's going to dry and it's going to hook.
Well, what about in a normal cue rack, where the cue's out a couple inches from the wall?
It all depends if it's an inner wall or an outside wall. I recommend an inner wall because the temperature is pretty much the same and the humidity is the same.
I see.
One time I had a problem in Japan. This guy was selling my cues and they were warping. And it's like, wait a minute, how come the shaft is warping? I went over there and he had a rack, beautiful rack, up against the blackboard. That was to the outside. When I tell you, he touched the wall, it was soaking wet. He moved the rack, he built some racks in the center of the room. He never had a problem with any cue anymore.
Very interesting information we're getting from Ernie here. Thank you very much for this. Let me ask you something then. What about if you put a cue in a case and lay it down, like in the closet? I know a lot of people store cues in their closets.
Cues they don't have straight papers. The shaft, if you roll the shaft and you look at it, it's almost like a bowl.
Right.
It has different tapers on it.
Exactly.
So what's happening is, as the wood relaxes in one position, it has a tendency to pull away and drop, and that's where the warp comes. Now
that's gravity. Yeah,
exactly. Now you can work in a warp shaft because the shaft was cut straight. So what you got to do is just pull the fibers against the warp. You put it on the table and you kind of pull it. And you can actually straighten it out if you work on it for a little while. It's not wasted.
Right.
A bud's a different story. Also a butt. These are my butts. They got three different tapers. They got a taper in the grip, taper in the nose, and a taper on the butt sleeve. They're different. So it's pretty much like a teeter-totter. So if you leave it in the same position for a long time, here comes gravity again. Or maybe it's a little hotter on top than the bottom, or vice versa. And that affects the inner part of the cue.
Any other tips or guidelines for somebody owning cues, owning expensive cues, that you would recommend as far as proper maintenance and care?
First of all, I recommend for those cues to be taken out, moved, put together, play with them. You don't have to make an everyday player, but take them out and use them.
Occasionally, once a week, something like that.
I want to make it like a regular thing to use one. Or most of these people got their own tables at home.
Right.
So maybe take one each every other night. Take a different cue and use that one. And try to keep tabs which one you use. Even if it's not your favorite cue, it's how it plays. You give it that cue of movement. Because let's face it, maybe someday you want to get rid of that cue and trade it for something else. You want it to be in good shape. You don't want to get rid of it because the thing is, in your opinion, is warped or something. You want it, your taste change. You want something else. You want to change your investment into something else. You want it to be good for somebody else.
So you got to take it out and drive it once in a while.
That's right.
It's like you can't leave a car parked all the time.
Exactly the same thing. I know guys with some very, very large car collections, and they make it a point to take one out in the weekend, at least for a couple of hours, or they have somebody to make sure they start those cars every day.
Right.
I personally lost a couple of cars because I just let them sit there. I lost a Maserati. It was a very, very rare car because I let it sit there and the engine flows.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, I'm all ears right now, Ernie, because I have about 40 cues of my own, and I keep like 10 of the cues that I enjoy playing with the most on my cue rack. Those get played, but the other 30 cues, they're in my closet and in a safe. So
safes are the worst.
Really.
I know that they're
Oh my
safest. They're the safest.
You're making me feel terrible right now.
I'm telling you, safes are the worst because the safes are very dry.
Yes.
You bring a key to my shop and I touch it, I tell you where the key's been kept. Because if it has ivory on it, it's all shrunk. Some of the fibers that we use and some of the woods that we use, they change at different ratios. Ivory shrinks when it's real dry, it shrinks. This is why it cracks. Because it's not solid, even if it's solid, it's got a tendon inside, that's how it cracks. If it's too humid, it begins to swell up. You take a cue that has been made in a real dry environment and you send it to New York in a real hot summer, and you're going to feel, everything begins to swell up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I've never been very friendly with the metal to wood joint, for example, because at a certain time of the year you can take it apart, put it together very easily. Don't let it be humid, because if you put it on, it's locked or you can't get it together.
Do you think our weather is better in Southern California?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty average. It's still. I got in my shop. I have dehumidifiers and humidifiers. Sometimes I can tell when the Santa Ana winds come in. Those are my worst enemy, because I got to start putting some water into the system, into the room. Otherwise, the wood changes.
Do you seal your shop up?
It's not really 100% sealed, but I have learned through the years how to make the changes. Either to introduce humidity or to take some of the humidity out.
Is that why I see all that ductwork in your shop?
No, that's vacuum cleaner.
That's all vacuum.
But I use it sometimes for what we're talking about.
Is the vacuum cleaner for your health that picks up all the?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I'm cutting shafts, for example, if I didn't have the vacuum cleaner, my shop would feel like it's a snowstorm there.
Yeah.
One time I tried to figure out how many particles of wood I could have making one shaft, and it was like 6 million.
Oh my God!
One shaft, 6 million chips of wood. I got a machine that's turning 25,000.
Well, I hope you're all enjoying this. I mean, in the match, we've only played one game. Shane's ahead 1-0. Little safety battle going on here with Max this second game. Ernie, this is quite an education. I don't think we've ever got this kind of information online before. I really appreciate it.
It's a lot more than just having a cue.
Oh, you could do a whole tutorial, I'm sure. Let me ask you something. Today, 2012, what kind of production will you turn out in your shop in a year? I mean, how many cues?
I'm not interested in making a whole lot of it. As a matter of fact, I'm slowing down in production.
You are slowing down.
Oh yeah, I don't. I was never. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, I was interested in going into mass production. Things didn't work out. That's why I stopped working. Then when I started again, I didn't have any intention of mass producing cues at all. I like the custom work. And more, I'm going to slow down making the numbers and start making more really, really classic pieces. Not too long ago, I made a collection for some guy that I worked on it for. It took me 5 years planning and engineering the cues.
Wow.
And 8 months working on it every single day, at least 10 hours a day. Each cue has 3,700 pieces on it. That's the kind of work that I like to be doing at this point in my life. Luckily enough, I had the customers that would pay for that kind of work. Because a cue like that sells for a couple $100,000. But it's not a pool cue anymore.
Your cues are going to be like Da Vinci's and Michelangelo's.
I'm still alive and I see the prices for the cues is astronomical.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, how many cues can you go out there and buy for $145 and sell it 30 years later for $3,500? You know?
Yeah.
It's,
If somebody wants to get a cue from you, is it still possible?
not right now. Right now, I'm asking for at least, I'm promising, put it that way, maybe 36 months. For
3 years.
Time.
3 years.
I'm beginning to work in my 50th anniversary series. Making 50 cues that are going to be about the same line as the 40th anniversary. And I don't know if you ever saw that cue.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I had a 30th anniversary. Thank you very much.
That was simpler.
Yeah.
The 40 was a lot more complicated.
Right.
The 50 is going to be a lot more complicated.
And you're going to make 50 of
I
them?
make 50 of them, yeah.
That sounds like it's going to be the whole year
It's a
project.
year project, correct.
Yeah.
So right now what I'm doing is I'm finishing off, I'm working in about 45 units right now. And that was like the cutoff. As soon as I finish those, I go to, I start working on the 50th full time.
So your 50th is next year?
Well, I want to have it ready for next year. You know what I mean? And I know it's going to be, no matter how fast I work, it'd be at least a year to make them, because they're not simple cues, they're very intricate cues. And I'm working by myself, I've been totally by myself now for the last, 5 years. So it's going to take me a while. So there's no sense taking any orders.
You're still a one-man operation.
Oh yeah, it's the only way I can, vouch for my work, because I had some, a couple of guys, helping me out one time. And what it amounts to be is everything they do, I got to double check it.
Right.
They don't understand what it is, that you need a 10,000 clearance or you need 2,000 clearance, and what happens is that mistake shows up later on. Maybe not in 6 months, maybe 2 years down the road. Now you got a rattle in your cue because that piece was made to lose, and that's not what my cues are known for.
And that's not acceptable to you.
No, it's not, because it's all even surely it loses the quality of the cue. I always, my way of thinking about a cue is that once you get used to it, you want to keep it forever. It becomes part of your arm, Of course,
we'll get you some scores from the other match, Frost and Alcooli, as soon as we can. Looks like Scott's ahead. This match here, Shane is leading 2-0. Excuse me, Ernie, I got to get back. Let's see. Ernie, take a look at this guy. This is the premier. This is the premier American pool player today. Shane is 28 years old. He's won 4 tournaments already this year. But to give you an idea, we were talking about prize money. He's won 4 tournaments, and his total prize money is about $85,000, which, listen, for a player like this, if he has a good year, he might win $175,000, $200,000. But they get some endorsement deals. Shane's sponsor is Q-Tech, which pays him a nice salary. So I do know this, and you'll appreciate this. Shane just bought a fourplex, his first piece of real estate that he's ever owned. So he's a smart young man.
Well, if he invests his money.
Yeah, not like some pool players we've known that have made thousands and thousands of dollars and have nothing to show for it. Ernie, the smartest move you knew when I had that pool room in Bakersfield all those years ago. Yeah. I had a very successful pool room for 6 years and did well. The smartest thing I ever did is I bought a house, then I bought a duplex, then we invested in some other property. And thank God I started doing that, because today, when I don't have a pool room anymore, I have some income from rental properties.
Yeah, you gotta start thinking about old age.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, all the money they used to go to the pool room, I remember. By the handful.
Tell me something. Tell me some of the name players that have had cues, Gina cues.
Oh my God!
Go back a ways and tell me.
I don't know if you remember a guy named Rudy Oliver.
Of course, I know Rudy very well.
He called me from Johnson City one year. He says, "Ernie, what are you doing in the shop?" I said, "I'm working, man." He says, "You should be here." I said, "Well, where are you?" I said, "I'm in Johnson City." I said, "Well, what should I be there?" He says, "Did you know that it's 110 players playing in the tournament, and I counted 82 of your cues?"
82 of your cues?
82 of my cues.
Oh my God.
I mean, I make cues for Taylor, Balsus, oh Jesus, Giliberto. I can't even remember all the names.
Eddie Kelly?
Of course, Kelly.
And I know Ronnie Allen had a...
Ronnie
yeah.
Allen.
Yeah. And what about Richie?
I mean, 3 or 4 cues for him.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
I can't really remember all the names. And if you go to my office, you got to find a gallery of old players. What was his name? The guy with the real deep voice. What was his name?
Johnny Ervelino.
Ervelino.
Yeah,
Winnie Vinnie. I mean, I can't, I forgot half of the names. But
the who's who of professional pool players, basically.
Yeah.
I know you from talking to other cue makers. You've always been very generous with your time and sharing knowledge with other people that are into the cue making business. I know Bob Hunter speaks very highly of you, and you've had an influence. Now there's been several young cue makers come out of Southern California that I think you influenced. Ed Pruitt, Tim Paget, and some of these fellas. In my opinion, in the years I've been around the billiard world, when people ask me the finest cue makers, I say, well, 2 of the best were from California as far as I'm concerned, Ernie Guttierrez and Tad Kohara. And you guys both go back a long ways.
Oh, yeah, he started about 6 months, maybe a year after I did.
Yeah. I just got an update. Scott Frost is leading 2-1 in that match over there.
Tad makes his, he has his own style, and then when he realized that my style was selling a lot faster, then he copied my style. But he's one of the only ones that, admitted the fact. He says, I knew how to make the cues, but I didn't know how to design it, so I copied the designs,
Yeah.
But again, you see an old Tad and the things still together perfect, because they were engineered and made perfect,
And they also hold their value.
Yeah, of course.
There's only a handful of cue makers even today where the cue is a good investment.
You see, I don't know. It's too bad because I have somewhat heard how some of the cue makers express themselves. They see one of my cues, say, well, I'm going to start making cues. If Ernie can get $5,000 for that cue, I can make it for $2,500. But then they're looking to make it better than what I did. They try to cut all the corners so they can make it cheaper and beat the price. So they kind of grow real fast for about 6 months. But the next 6 months, they're taking all the comebacks to fix all the problems they created.
Ernie, you may be the most copied cue maker of all time. You know that. Yep. You have been the biggest innovator in the cue making art that I've ever seen. You constantly have come out with new designs, but within a year or two of your new designs, people are trying to copy you.
What's the saying? Copying is a form of flattery.
Yeah, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
It's to the point where, I only had 2 hands.
Right.
And the day they say, listen, I'd rather have this one other than the Gina cue, that day I worry about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
In the meantime, somebody had to start everybody else in the business. Guys making a copy of my cue for $75, I say thank you. Because if that guy stays with pool, pretty soon he wants to have the original of that design. And then they come to me. So if that guy in ECA is 100,000 people playing pool, and I cash 2%, I'm making a lot of cues. Difference is I don't sell them for $75.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's how I look at it.
Well, your cues have the magic name Gina cue. A lot of people don't know the name Gina came from your daughter, right? Gina cue.
Now she's asking for royalties.
Yeah, now she wants royalties. You're a grandfather.
I'm a great-grandfather.
You're a great-grandfather.
Yeah.
God bless you.
I had to put my driver's license to somebody the other day because he didn't believe I'm 71 years old.
Well, you look good. You don't change too much to me, man.
Clean living.
I know it. I know it. Well, you got a beautiful wife, Lucy, at home, too. I know she takes good care of you. It's a tough shot, jacked up over the ball.
Yep. But look at how smooth he is. I mean, it makes it look so easy. Makes me.
And look at these pockets. They look like snooker pockets.
I know.
These are, our friend Ernesto Dominguez does all these tables. And even the professional players come to me and say, this is the toughest equipment we play on. these are the tightest tables we play on.
Well, listen, as good as they get, and you have to make it a little tougher. Otherwise, they just run hundreds of balls, you know.
Exactly. Well, this is one reason that professional pool is going more and more to 10 ball, because the top players today, they were making 9 ball look too easy.
No.
You know, this game's a lot tougher. That one extra ball makes it a lot more difficult. Well, Shane's winning every game here. It's 4-0. These are the last two undefeated. Yeah, winner breaks. Last 2 undefeated players. On the loser side, we've got Dennis Arculio from the Philippines playing Scott Frost from Phoenix. The loser of this match here will play the winner of the Frost-Arculio match next. Ernie, have you got a table at home now?
I have a table that's in the shop, and it's holding 3 of my machines.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
In my older shop,
yeah,
I had the table together, but I never did any work, and I never got any sleep.
Well, you've been in that shop in North Hollywood for how long? A good 20 years.
What?
Huh? That's what I thought.
1988. You know, that shop was my race shop before. You know, I had all my race cars there.
Right. I remember seeing a race car in there and a motorcycle.
Yeah, well, the bikes is still there, but before, you know, when I started putting it together for the queues, I sold all my race cars. I moved into a shop around 84, I believe. No, before that. Before that.
You were close to 30 years then.
Hold it for a minute.
Yeah.
I met my wife in 84. And that's when we raced my car in Indianapolis. In 82, I moved into that shop.
That's 30 years.
And then I started putting it together for the queues in 88.
There you go.
I cleaned up. I got rid of all my cars, and I started putting races together.
Tell us about your time in racing. Most people, everybody knows you as a top cue maker, but they may not know that you were very involved in automobile racing.
I was involved in designing a lot of stuff, you know.
Right.
Design,
You're the engineer.
I started, I designed the sequential fuel injection system that you probably see in every car nowadays, except they never made any money out of it.
You didn't get a patent, or what?
I wanted to get a patent. I made a mistake. I went and talked to the genius in Germany, and they captured my idea, and then from that on, we talked to you later. You know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah, nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
You know, of course, it wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, but, you know, they had 40 years to perfect it, you know. But that was my initial thing as far as the designing stuff was. Then I got really involved in motorcycles. I designed a slipper clutch for a new bike.
What was it called?
A slipper clutch. You know, it's not. It wasn't my idea to make the slipper clutch. It was my idea to design this type of a slipper clutch for a bike that was very competitive. You know, in fact, that part helped us win the national championship in 2005. You know, now the factory is making the bikes with the slipper clutch standard, you know.
I see.
But it was a piece of engineering. It was a lot of fun. Got really involved with Yamaha. And, you know, I spent about probably close to a year, you know, working around designing that stuff.
So you're working for the factory then?
Sort of, not for the factory, the factory team.
The factory
satellite team.
I see.
I still have some of the bikes that, you know, with the stuff that I designed, which, in fact, I'm getting ready to get rid of them, you know. I'm seeing too many accidents in motorcycles, so I'm beginning to get a little shy of being, you know, riding around at 150 miles an hour in the hills.
Well, my motorcycle days are behind me too. If you remember, I was into bikes for a long time.
Yeah, but
we rode around a couple times.
But you went to bikes, you want the kind of bikes that I'm into.
No.
I mean, what I got is what they call is, you know, real rockets. You know.
Right.
I don't have a machine that is not capable of doing at least 200 miles an hour.
Right.
That's I got really involved on it. I really liked it too, you know. But I don't know. It's unless I went into it 100%. You know, I mean, buying equipment, buying all of that. I would have to actually give up the queues. You can't have the two shops together, you know, because in one shop you're going to have like all kinds of oil in the air and stuff.
Right. Right.
You can't have that together. It was fun.
I mean, do you have a personal bike now that you ride?
I have 4, and you know.
Yeah.
I was out this morning, 6:30 in the morning. I was up in Los Angeles Crest.
You were riding this morning?
Yeah.
What kind of bike were you
I rode
riding?
100 miles an hour this morning.
What kind of bike were you riding?
RUV 250 two-stroke, competition bike.
I see.
Very quick, nimble machine.
And what make is it? What manufacturer was it?
Suzuki.
Oh, a Suzuki.
Yeah. Very, very. It's a Grand Prix bike.
You're amazing, Ernie. 71 years old, and you're driving around on race bikes. You know what I ride now? I still got a bike. I got a Vespa 150 scooter, and you know what? I love it. Gets 75 miles a gallon. I park it anywhere. You'll appreciate this. I found out I've had 3 scooters, but I found out a 150 is big enough I can keep up with any street traffic. It'll go 50, 55 miles an hour, so I can drive it on the street. I don't want to drive a bike on a freeway.
See, I don't ride in the street.
Yeah.
I'm very little in the freeway.
Yeah.
I'm up in the canyons or in the track. And I'm probably, me and these other guys that I ride with, we're probably the oldest guys up there and the fastest guys up in the hills.
3-2, Dennis.
Dennis is leading 3-2 now, and Shane is leading 4-1 in this match in front of us.
Nice part about the bike like that is that when you're riding it, it's all you are thinking about is the next turn. Your brain is completely clear of any problems, of everything. When you come back home, you're a brand new born baby. It's super relaxing. I think
So
you have to put yourself to that peak of concentration and maybe even daring luck, I guess, destiny, to really be able to relax. Because I really feel different when I come home. I feel like
You've exercised your brain.
Well, the thing is, but only one direction.
Yeah.
It's like, you're totally concentrating on what you're doing, nothing else. You don't have no bills in your head, you don't have nothing.
It's like when you're driving a race car. I did a little bit of that.
Same thing.
You better be paying attention all the time, very closely.
You're in a different world, Yeah. I've flown a plane, I've flown a helicopters, and in a helicopter, I think driving a bike is about as close as you can come to flying in a jet. It's about as close as you can come in flying a jet. Maybe low flying a jet, like 500 feet.
Well, a helicopter is very complicated to pilot.
That's a concentration, yes.
Yeah. You're using both hands and both feet, right?
Well, not only that, you're reading the conditions. There's a lot of things. If you're riding a, like a turbo helicopter, then you got a lot to control there. It's not easy, I was lucky enough to own one of those things for a while.
Do you have a pilot's license?
I don't have it anymore. I lost it. I haven't flown now, and
you lost it because you were inactive.
Yeah, I just quit.
Yeah. Okay.
I just quit.
So you did have a pilot's license?
Not a helicopter pilot license. I couldn't accumulate enough hours or spend enough money to have.
Right.
I used to have a pilot that flew it, but I flew along with him. But regular, fixed wing, I had a pilot license for years.
A friend of mine that was a pilot told me once you learn to fly a small plane, he said you could fly a big plane too.
Oh yeah.
Basically, they work the same.
Actually, what? Actually, the big planes nowadays are so well equipped. They take a good pilot and make him into a bad pilot because they actually forget, the emergency procedures, things that you're supposed to be fresh on because they depend too much on the automatic pilots, the navigation. I flew an awful lot in South America where you don't have the radio help that you have here. You know what I mean?
You have to be a really good pilot.
They call it bush pilots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, bush pilots.
It's like, I'll tell you make a mistake, you might wind up in the Amazon somewhere, nobody's going to find you. And that's why I really enjoyed flying there, because to be able to go from one ranch to another, for example, if you go by ground in the winter, forget it, because you just can't get through.
Right.
You're on a plane, it's like a 20-minute flight from one, and I had a lot of friends. They had cattle ranches in the Oriental Valleys of Colombia. So that's why I learned how to fly, because I really enjoyed it.
That's where you're originally from?
Colombia, yes.
Yeah. How old were you when you came to the States?
I was 17 years old.
17 years old. Did you come with your family?
No, I came by myself. I had an aunt, so I stayed with her for a while. And then...
and what did you do when you first got here?
I went to work for this company called Lindy Pen Company. They made these bulb ballpoint pens.
Oh, okay.
I worked with them for like a year. And then I ended up working in a garage.
Like a mechanic.
Like a golfer, whatever.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I learned a lot of mechanics there, I had that facility. Then I started my own company. It was a maintenance company.
Yeah.
If you need it, I do it. I didn't care what it was. And about that time, I started, thinking around with cues. I started playing pool. And I really like it, so I made a cue for myself.
You never played when you were in Colombia?
I played billiards.
Okay.
And I always liked it, and it was funny because about maybe 15 years ago, my mother told me to open a certain drawer in her dresser. She said, there's something in there that belongs to you. I said, well, what can it be? She said, just look at it. It was a cube of chalk that my father took away from me one time. He got me out of a pool hall. And look what I ended up doing, set up a pool,
How did you learn how to use all the equipment? Are you
I know how
self-taught?
to use, I'm self-taught, yes. I don't know, I had this facility to be able to comprehend and understand the machine. We have a joke in my shop, something breaks down, is we had to call the technician. He's got to change my coat and go to work on it.
You're your own repairman.
Well, listen, I built all the machines. I bought the frames and I built the machines. They're all dedicated machines for each operation.
How many different pieces of equipment do you have in that shop?
Altogether, I think it's like 65.
All does its own function.
Including auxiliary machines like punch presses. I make all my own rings. I make all my own parts. I buy the materials. I don't buy ready-made parts.
You buy the wood.
The materials,
Yeah.
rough materials. I buy the wood for the shafts. I even bought lugs at one time. Ebony lugs, and cut them up.
Well, you're just like a sculptor that takes a big piece of rock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know how I want the parts to function. I know how I want it, to work. So I make my own parts. Of course, in my days you couldn't buy the parts, so I got used to it. I mean, nowadays, this is how so many cue makers nowadays. They buy a lathe and they get a set of calipers, and either one of my cues or another top cue maker. They get the dimensions, and they buy all their parts from from all the suppliers, and they become cue makers.
Anybody can be a cue maker today.
Of course.
And there's hundreds of cue makers.
I mean, it's a lot of things that they are using that they don't know who designed it. They don't know who started them. Remember in the old days, you could not do Marseille shots or break with your two-piece cue because they would ruin the joint.
Right.
Or who do you think cued that problem? Me? I started using materials that in those days were classified for the Air Force.
Right.
They were going in the joint. They had a faster memory.
I'm old enough to remember the Paradise cues, and they would come apart. Yeah.
A lot of stuff that I introduced into the business, and nobody has any idea who did it. In fact, I've been pretty tempted to write a book to bring all these out.
Well, you're writing a book right now as we talk. Meanwhile, in this match, Shane is leading 4-1. It's a race to 9 for the hot seat. And Max has got a little dilemma here. Ernie, you see that he's got no pocket for the 5 ball, so he's looking safe here.
Tough cut right here, but
yeah, he's looking at it. He's looking at it.
Yeah, but what about the 6 ball?
Yeah, you got to turn your cue ball loose and look where the 6 ball is.
You can make a 6-act, But if he doesn't hit it perfect, he can scratch in the corner too.
That's the problem. That's the problem. He knows he's got a problem here.
He's going for it.
Max is real uncertain about this shot.
Oh, it is a tough shot.
Why not play a safe here? Well, he overcut it. Look at this. The 8. Yeah, the 8.
No.
Oh, wait a second.
Helfert. But he could scratch with it.
Somehow, some way, Ernie, Max always seems to find a way to finish in the top 3 or 4 at hard times. And here he is again. He's in the top 3. You know, another player that had a very successful tournament, a local player, is Corey Harper. He tied for 5th and 6th.
Well, they play here all the time, so you know.
It's kind of the home. It's the home court. They're used to these tables.
No, and the atmosphere too. You know, it's home court. You know, that's why they always say, you know, home court is another advantage. You know.
They're comfortable with the surroundings. They see friendly faces.
I tried to play at Louisville a couple of years ago. I played this guy. My hands were shaking.
Did you play in the bank pool tournament?
No.
You just tried to play.
Somebody put me in it, you know, staked me in the game.
Oh no!
Playing 9-ball. And I got into this game. The first ball that I rattled in the pocket, I started shaking.
You got to get conditioned for it.
And this guy, I could have given him a lot because I watched him play later on, and just how bad I played.
I can't see you getting staked.
Well, this is how easy the game was. Figure, you know, they were going to rob somebody. And oh my
Boy,
God.
what did he do there? That was so un-Shane-like. Well, you know, he was trying to pound it to get the cue ball all the way around the table. It looked like he was just trying to do too much. Over on the other table, Dennis Arculio is leading Scott Frost 5-2. Nice opportunity for Max.
Yeah.
6-2 now.
6-2.
That's it.
Well, Max had trailed 4-0. Now he pulls within 2 games at 4-2. Thanks to that uncharacteristic miss by Shane.
Happens to the best. Mental mistake.
On these tables here, you've got to maintain, kind of like what you were talking about riding a motorcycle. You must maintain your concentration at all time, Ernie. Even a little lapse of concentration, you'll miss the ball.
It goes along with everything, really, when it comes down to it, you know.
Stay focused.
You have to. If you're operating machines and you're doing something delicate, you got to keep your eyes on it. Make sure what's happening. You can just, the minute you lose that concentration, you start losing perfection.
You can damage the piece of what you're working on. You could hurt yourself.
Or hurt yourself or run the machine, you know. I was very lucky when I was young. I went to school, you know, to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school, and I learned some shop matters that, you know, that really taught me how to behave in the shop. You know, not try to do any more than what you can do right now, this point, right now.
Stay focused on what you're doing right at this moment.
Can't be thinking I got to get done with it.
Yeah.
You got to be thinking I got to do it right. If it took a day, it took a day. If it took 2 hours, it took 2 hours. I've done jobs, it took me a month working the same part. But
just to get it right.
Just to get it right, you know. And that's just mental training, you know.
Well, Max made a ball on the break. He really has no good shot to one. It looks like he can play safe, put the cue ball behind the 4 ball here. Just like this.
Yeah,
well, that's not what he wanted to do.
No,
he didn't want to double kiss it.
Sold out.
He wanted to hide that cue ball behind the 4.
Or put the one behind the 2.
Yeah. Well, let's see if Shane can make up for his mistake in the last rack and run this rack. Even though we have the #1 player in the world on the other table, Dennis Arculio, when it comes to a 10-ball tournament, Shane is the favorite.
Really?
Yeah, he's got the best break. He's mastered the break at this game. Kind of like Earl Strickland did at 9-ball. He's also got the mindset, Ernie. What I notice about Shane, when he goes to a tournament, he expects to win. I mean, he really thinks he's going to win the tournament every time.
Well,
He feels-
I think you have to think that way.
He feels like he's the best player.
You can't play it not to lose.
Yeah.
You got to attack the game is to win all the time. You know, I
Shane-
think guys in the shop sometimes, it cracks me up. The guy comes over with the cues off a little bit. You know, it's like $5,000, sometimes a $10,000 cue. And what can we do, Ernie? I mean, this thing's got a ball in it, you know. I walk over to the saw and just whack it right in front of him. If I could only have some pictures of these people looking at it. Now what? I said, we put it back together. He said, how are you going to do that? Watch. You know, and I had let a couple of guys, you know, watch me put it back together and make it perfect. It's like, wow, man, I could have never believed it.
That would be pretty shocking. That would be pretty shocking. Yeah. Game 5 for Shane. He leads 5-2. Ernie, I appreciate you taking time to join us here.
Yeah, it's been fun. My pleasure.
I'm glad you found a way to come back to Hard Times. We haven't seen you here in years.
20 years, to be exact.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Really?
Ernie.
Actually, the only other tournament that I've been to was Louisville, and that was, I think, like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I went there just out of curiosity because everybody talked about it, you know. I stay away from the tournaments. I just don't have the time. When I got the time, I'm too tired.
You know, the last tournament in LA I remember you coming to is when we did the LA Billiard Expo at Burbank. That was 2001. That's
right.
11 years ago.
Okay. Oops.
Well, I hear balls going down.
You know, he has this easy stroke when he hits the balls. It's not a really physical.
He just pops them, but he has a way of doing it where he controls the cue ball and he makes the ball and has a shot at the one. That's exactly what he wants to accomplish every time.
Oops.
You may not be aware of it, Ernie, but Shane was born a deaf mute. And with the aid of a hearing aid, he has some hearing in one ear. He had to learn to speak. And a couple years ago, I asked Shane about that. I said, how difficult was it to learn how to speak when you can't hear? He said it was much harder than learning to play pool, to learn to speak.
It has to be. And then again, maybe that's an advantage that he has as far as concentration is concerned.
Yeah, he's able to really stay focused.
Yep.
Scott Frost running out over there. I think the score on the far table is Dennis is 6-3. Arculio over Frost.
I mean, he's got a cue ball like he's got it on a string.
And in this match, pardon me?
Excuse me. Go ahead. I'm gonna let you, narrate your game over here. I'm gonna step away.
Ernie, thank you so much.
Thank
it's a
you for
pleasure
having me
talking
over.
with. Thank you for imparting all this information and knowledge. I have to tell you, I learned a lot just by listening
hope
to you just now. And we got 1,000 other people out there that are
I
saying
hope you
thank
learned
you
something
too.
about it, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hope to see you soon, man.
All right.
Don't stay away so long. Okay. That was Ernie Guttierrez, the maker of Gina Q. Barbara, how are you?
I'm just ducky, as they say.
Barbara Lee
That's right.
joins me in the booth.
The barbecue. First time, I think, with you, Jay. I don't know that I've been in here with you before.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. You know, Barbara, they've been playing now on these tables for 3 days, and you can see they're in stroke. They got the feel of the table. They know the speed. They understand the rails, the cloth.
Most of them do. That's true. Scott and his opponent didn't so much earlier today, but Scott, I think it was Scott and Corey, were having quite the trouble. Or maybe it wasn't Scott.
That was, you're thinking of Corey and Max,
No,
the
Corey
earlier
and Max.
match,
That's
right?
Yeah. They were both having a little, but I think that was also one of the first matches of the day, and
Yeah, that was a noon match.
yeah. So, but now I think you're absolutely right. They're getting how these pockets take these balls, and things are working out a little bit better now. He certainly did not want to do that.
Yeah, he just tied up the 4 ball with the 7.
Didn't want to run into that.
Shane's got a good shot at the 3.
Checking out to see.
I don't know what, I mean, conceivably he could try to break these balls up, but
Yes.
I think he's going to play position perhaps to play a safe. Although, with Shane, you never know. He may find some kind of shot, a bank shot.
Yeah, they fool
Let's
you
see.
sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
you think that you see exactly what you would do, and they come up with some completely different strategy. They're going, whoa. And it also depends on how they feel, how they're shooting, and where they are in the match, score-wise. I think that all plays, whether or not they think about it consciously. I think it does come into play. I think he's going to play for the 7.
Well, he could shoot off the edge of the 4 that way. The 7's going to hold the 4 on the end rail, Barbara, and he can send the cue ball all the way down table behind the 9 and 10. Although
that's true.
it looks like he might be. Is he playing this combination?
It looks like he is.
No, he was playing safe all the way.
It looked like he was lining up for it.
Yeah, he was playing safe all the way.
Well, just like you said, two-way there.
He wanted to get that cue ball behind the 10 ball, but you know, anytime you leave a player end rail to end rail like this, it's not going to be easy.
No, so Max is going to have to come with a shot here too. He has a safety opportunity here too. But it's funny how even with this, the lesser amount of pool of balls on the table, like since the beginning of the rack, strategically placed, they still present problems when trying to maneuver that cue ball around for that safety, and you don't want to be running into them.
This is not an easy safety here.
No.
He's trying to come off the right edge,
Yeah,
our left as we
feather
look at it.
Oh no, he went for the bank.
If he was shooting it,
Look at
boy,
this.
what a great bank
Look at
that was.
Okay, well.
What a great bank. Yeah, we'll clap for that one.
Yeah,
We'll give him a couple taps on the table for that one.
We certainly will.
That was kind of do or die, this wreck.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Had he missed that would have been critical for this particular game. Well, he's got work to do to catch up, for sure. Now, see, this is what I'm talking about, these pockets. And that particular kind of power stroke, trying to power those things in.
You know how often, Barbara, I see a player make a great shot and then miss the shot afterwards.
Absolutely.
It's almost like they relax.
Well, I think sometimes, I know I've done this, is you're still on that high, you know, from pocketing that ball or making some great shot. and you don't get yourself over it quick enough, and you don't collect yourself, go have a little drink of water, calm it down, let it go, and approach the table newly for your next shot.
Yeah, you got to relax before you shoot your next shot.
And you're just
kind of calm down because you
carry it right with you, and then that's the result. Well, anybody that's played any kind of pool at all for any length of time and gotten in the game, that's happened, for sure, no question about it. Let's see here now. That's going to make
that's 7.
7-2.
That's 7-2. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, let me get back here.
Pretty commanding lead here for Shane Van Boening. It almost looked like the last gasp for Max.
All right.
I mean, Max needed that game badly.
Absolutely, he did. Well, and again, he's been struggling a little today. He barely came out of that last match that he was in just by the skin of his teeth.
With Corey.
Yeah, and he was grinning about it. He looked over and went, wow,
Well, even a loss here won't put him out of the tournament because he's on the win. This is the hot seat match.
Well, I wonder if what's in his mind, too, and it has to play on one, coming third, a couple of times, and that gets a little stuck in your head. And then you've got this little, I'm going to break through this time, or I don't want to come in third again.
We had this conversation before the match. I said, Max, you always seem to make it to the final 3 or 4. He said, I need to win one, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's just additional pressure that you put on yourself at the table that you don't need. Really, you don't need that extra
It's hard. In this sport, it's hard to break through and win a tournament.
Very hard. Well, especially with this kind of a player field. This field is full of champions here, this event.
Yeah, most players would be thrilled to finish in the top 3.
Oh, you betcha.
Well, I think Dennis Orculio's on the hill, leading, looks like 8-3.
Yeah, considerably.
Yeah.
I talked to Indian Roger outside, who finished in...
He made the money.
He came into the money, but he was still, we had a poster of the event here, and we, wanted everybody's signatures, and he was backing off saying, I don't deserve to sign the poster. And I said, what are you talking about? You played in the event. He goes,
and you got in the money.
And you got in the money. What's the problem here? And he just absolutely would not do it. He says, I'm not until I get up there a little higher do I feel I deserve to be signing a poster. And I said, well, all right, it's up to you, but...
Well, good for him.
Absolutely.
Good for him.
And he did quite well in the Chuck Markoulis tournament up there in Sacramento, Hard Times. Played great. Finished really high.
And, he came off a long layoff. He didn't play much pool for several years. He's only been playing again a year or so.
Yes, now. But he's been, But he has been playing pretty consistently now for this last year. I mean, he's
Max,
down here all the time, so...
Max really has no shot at the one here other than a safety. I think he was trying to play a billiard on the 9-ball, but
I think he was too.
He left a wide open table.
This is wide open for Shane. This is just a road map for Shane. Don't get straight on the 2, however.
This is not the guy you want to leave that kind of opening shot to.
No, you sure don't. Because he will make you pay. With finesse, I might add.
He'll make you pay and pay some more.
Yeah, he'll empty your bank account, that's for sure.
This rack right here would put Shane on the hill.
I think it may very well do that, but as you well know, Jay, commentator's curse is a very nasty affliction. So.
Oh my God, I was doing it yesterday. Everybody, I'd say this guy's going to run out and he'd miss.
Of course. That's why I'm very hesitant anymore to be a total 100% positive. I think Billy Incardona would agree with me. I think maybe that's even where that came from, commentator's curse. I don't know.
Shane looks like he's
just so focused. Very confident player, Shane Van Boening.
Boy, he wrapped that ball in the pocket,
yes,
didn't he?
Yes, he did. He wasn't even worried about that ball coming down here for any
No.
kind of a possible. He knew exactly where that cue ball was going. Well, you know, hats off to him. You know, he came up into the ranks so fast when he hit the scenes. I mean, really just sort of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, he
and started
exploded.
taking
He exploded in the
over.
pool world about 5 years ago.
Everything immediately became an overnight name.
And now he is the force in American pool.
Yeah, out of the where is it, Iowa or North Dakota?
Sioux
someplace?
City, South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yeah.
I knew it was either the Dakotas or Iowa. I couldn't remember. But unbelievable. And you wonder, you know, how many years did he spend in those local halls?
Pardon me,
How many years did he spend in the local halls there, you know?
Well, he grew up in a pool family.
So-
his mother, his aunt, his
Yeah.
grandfather, they were all BCA champions in different divisions.
So that's what I'm saying, hours and hours in a pool hall from a very young age.
He was playing pool from the time he was 6 years old. I mean, this is it. This has been his sport.
I bet they're so proud of him, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Really.
Well,
I
he's
bet they
a
just-
good man too.
Yeah,
And remember,
absolutely.
he's overcome adversity
Boy,
to get
that's
where he
for
is.
sure.
Dennis is on the other table. He's running out for the match right now.
You know, I like him for this event.
Yeah.
I've been watching Dennis this whole event. Look at this. And there it goes. Dennis Orpolio over Scott Frost. Scott Frost parked in his chair the majority of that match. And we are down to 3 players now out of 64 starting in this 10-ball open here at Hard Times, Bellflower, California.
These matches are going fast, I'll tell you.
They certainly are now.
What a beautiful soft touch
Jeez.
Shane just showed there.
I love his stroke. I really do. You know, he can bring it all.
Boy, he's got a nice soft touch, and he has power when
And
he
he's
needs
got
it as
power.
well.
That's right. And he uses that power a lot. And yet, you're right. When it calls for a very, very gentle, soft, little touchy shot, not a problem.
Well, Shane is approaching the finish line.
He certainly is. We're going to have, looks like we're going to have 2 back-to-back wins here inside of, 20 seconds?
A minute or so.
Wow.
Max gives him
And
that
Max
one.
give it to him. Wow. Shane Van Boening over Max Eberle. And Max sticking out of his tongue and kind of going, wow, you know, what can you do about that? Nothing, not a
The
thing.
next match we're going to have is Dennis Orculio will play Max.
Yes.
That's the loser's bracket final. And Shane's in the hot sheet waiting for the winner of that match.
That's right. Shane is 15 minutes to go. Okay, we're probably going to take a short break here. Let the players break, the commentators break. We're just going to break all over the place and not make one ball in the pocket.
There you go. Thank you, Barbara.
Okie dokie.
See you all in a little while.
All right, we'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.